Hey, I'm Amy McClelland, or her avatar at least.
And I'm also a pianist, and I've taught piano for a lot of years, and I like to compose and do other things related to music. Here I am practicing one afternoon with my faithful companion, Pug Louis Armstrong. I also love dogs, and I love to rescue and train dogs as well. But anyway, I wanted to tell you about an upcoming concert that we'll be doing in Birmingham, Alabama, which will be for piano trio.
So I'll be playing the piano part, and there'll be some amazing musicians from the Alabama Symphony Orchestra playing the violin and cello. We're going to play a major work
by an awesome composer. Of course, he's no longer living. Dvorak's Piano Trio No. 4 in E minor.
But we were trying to find another piece or a set of pieces that would be a little more lighter in nature, audience-friendly.
And I couldn't find anything that really fit. So I thought, hey, why not just compose something myself?
So the first set of pieces I composed, which hopefully will open the concert, are a set of 10 short pieces, and they're entitled Postcards. So just like a postcard, they're nice and short, about 1 to 3 minutes long. And each one is about a specific word that has to do with travel. Then we'll play the major work, and then we'll close with a set of pieces that are inspired by poems by famous poets. Some of my favorites, Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, and actually the final one will be a poem that is commissioned by a modern-day poet.
Which is where you come in.
Because we're going to need to find some funds somewhere to be able to rent the hall and pay the musicians and the poet as well. And we were hoping to also include the names of the donors and contributors in the program, and maybe even perhaps compose a piece that involves the name somehow that we can include on the program. But at any rate, I hope you might want to be a part of this project and help support some modern-day poets and composers and musicians in the Birmingham, Alabama area,
and really all over the world, because the music will then be available for others to perform and the poem available for others to enjoy.
So the first postcard is a Latin word that describes the feeling that pushes someone to travel. This adjective describes a desire to change and alter one's life, behavior, or situation. And in the piece itself, you see this opening passage that really drives you and pushes you into the piece, propels you forward,
with these really fast harmonic changes. Repeating this perpetual motion kind of thing, like almost like a train, the wheels on a train going. And I also tried to kind of capture this frontier Americana sound with the harmonies. I love that chordal open harmony.
It has this perpetual motion kind of a feeling to it, as if you're traveling or wanting to travel. So here we go.
So I was going to say, if you could just imagine a pretty sound as you listen to this, bear in mind this is a computer program, and it doesn't really sound like a real violin. In fact, it sounds like a harmonica or a duck or something being killed. But anyway, imagine musical playing, expressive, beautiful tones, a Stradivarius, and some dynamics if you can.
So when you're looking at this music score, the bottom two staffs here and here are the piano part. Then later on, when the violins come in and the cello, this line here will be the cello part, right here, and then this top one will be the violin.
So the second postcard is or saudade. It's a Portuguese, Brazilian word that describes the nostalgia and love that remain after the journey ends. And it's a desire to return to a favorite place or a person that you met along the way. It's a yearning to be near to something or someone distant, and the feeling that remains after the trip ends. And impetus for the traveler to return to a favorite place, even with the knowledge that it may not be the same upon revisiting. Later on, there's this little section where there's a prepared piano, so it kind of imitates the sound of the pizzicata cello. Maybe some flashcards. So these little teaching aid rubber things, just to mute the sound. Nothing that will hurt the piano, of course. But if I didn't have that in there, it would sound just like a regular vibrating pitch. So here is saudade. Again, try to imagine rubato and a pretty sound and not this computer sound. So the third postcard, resfeber, is a Swedish word which describes the restless race of the traveler's heart before the journey begins, when anxiety and anticipation and thrill are all tangled up together.
Here's me when I was around 6 years old. I flew to Sweden that summer with my dad to see my aunts and uncles, and my farmor and farfar, my grandparents and cousins. Well, I was so excited the night before that I couldn't sleep at all because I kept trying to imagine what it was going to be like to fly in the plane.
I was so excited.
So I tried to capture that ecstatic joy of Christmas morning. Just the sparkle and the wonder. meshi is the fourth postcard, and it's this wonderful Japanese word that describes that truly unique kind of stress that you experience when speaking in a foreign language, or that you can experience. Meshi literally means boiled rice, and yoko means horizontal. So putting them together, it means a meal eaten sideways. But if you listen closely, you'll hear snippets of Frere Jacques. But you'll hear it in a very distorted way, just like when you're in another country trying to figure out what they're saying. Like, are they doing Frere Jacques? And then meanwhile, these guys, the violin and cello, are going to hold this long note and try to hide their bow changes, so it just seems like one continuous sound. But sometimes you're going to hear this tune, Frere Jacques, like turned upside down, which reflects another aspect of this amazing, untranslatable word, this Japanese word, because normally, or sometimes, their language is written vertically, whereas other languages are written horizontally. So, here is Yoko Meshi. The fifth postcard is a German word,
Fernweh,
and it literally translates to far sickness or distance sickness versus another word which means homesickness. It describes a feeling that's even stronger than wanderlust. While someone with wanderlust might sit at home happily dreaming about all the places they could visit, someone with this would feel a deeper sense of longing and a sort of homesickness, but for distant lands. It opens with this very forlorn sounding cello part. Stark, that's the only thing playing. If you hear a weird snuffle noise, that's my pug down here misbehaving. He's just such a naughty boy. Maybe you could picture him when you hear it. So here we go. It's really hard to try to get the dynamics to balance, but anyway, the piano was too soft there at the end. The sixth postcard is a French word that describes a chance encounter with something wonderful. Whether it's stumbling across a hidden back street, a quaint cafe, or connecting with a local, this French word describes those magical moments we experience in our journeys. There's a sleuth-like characteristic to it, suspenseful type character to the piece, because we're going to be exploring.
Like that character in Garrison Keillor that they always do.
So here is
Trouvaille.
Any guesses as to how to pronounce this seventh postcard? This Swedish word? Anyone? Okay, even though my dad was Swedish, this totally calls for a Google opportunity. Well, here's what I found on the internet.
Livsnjutare. Livsnjutare. Livsnjutare.
Yeah, what he just said. Anyway, this fancy word means someone who loves life fully and lives it to the extreme. Literally, it means enjoyer of life. So I tried to capture that with this really rhythmic kind of upbeat ostinato pattern in the piano part.
And then a little outburst of joy in the violin and cello. Real rhythmic. Little slides, chords, and mentos that they can do. Doesn't sound like that. Also, there's a displacement of the beat. So, like if it's in 4/4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, then you'll feel 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 on top of that sometimes. So, like the left hand 1 2 3 4 1 2, and the right hand 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3. So together, really kind of gives it this jolly, energetic vibrance.
Have you ever danced the tango? Well, this eighth word, this eighth postcard, significant, kind of reminds me of a tango. Because it doesn't always take two to tango. Because sometimes the kind of travels, the real journeys, where you return home altered on some cellular level, are best done by yourself. So this Latin word, from the Latin word significant means lonely or solitary, and it describes anyone who enjoys meandering around new countries and new places alone in order to take it all in. So more than your daily grind, more than your bricks and mortar home, it's the people in your life who fix your sense of identity. And being away from them for a while is strangely freeing, no matter how much you love them. So it doesn't always necessarily take two to tango. So there's kind of two moods to this piece. The first one would be when you travel alone, sometimes you do feel lonely or reflective. It's more austere. And then the second feeling, it gets a little faster at the end. It's pretty vibrant, where you smell everything, you taste everything, you savor everything in a way that you don't usually when you're with other people.
This one's like an intro to a tango at the beginning. Travel, it's a very vibrant experience. You see more, you smell more, you taste more, you feel more alive. So there's this change, like an awakening in the middle of the piece, and the tempo picks up. That picks up and it builds to this big, happy, joyous celebration at the end.
Then the cello comes in. So have you ever traveled somewhere and seen something that was so fascinating that you were awed to the point where your jaw dropped? It was like that for my husband and I when we first saw the fireworks at Epcot Center. Just amazing. And after a while, we were looking at it, and then we looked at each other, and we're sitting there with our mouths wide open. But this Latin word, numinous, describes an experience that makes you fearful yet fascinated, awed yet attracted. It's the powerful personal feeling of being overwhelmed and inspired. Like if you have a numinous experience at Yosemite National Park, gazing up at El Capitan or at a towering black bear. So I tried to capture that magic.
Sound openness by having one hand really high and one really low. And then the open chords.
Instead of having closed chords, they're opened up, so it's real expansive.
The cello part, and then the piano joining in.
So you might have noticed the reference to one of my dad's favorite Swedish composers, Wilhelm Peterson Berger, at the end there. But I just had to include that because it's one of my favorite pieces he ever did, landscape. And that's sort of what this is about, are just beautiful landscapes and scenes. So the 10th postcard, quaquaversal, is this really cool Latin word that describes things moving or happening in every direction instantaneously. So we've taken the motives and the melodies from all the previous postcards and woven them together to kind of create this chaotic feeling, which, let's face it, we all have experienced when traveling. But it's like that feeling when you think your passport's in your sock drawer, but it's not, and your flight leaves in 3 hours.
So then we do the amazing Piano Trio number 4 in E minor by Antonin Dvorak. Yeah, I can't pronounce Czech. Hey, that little rolly R thing there, those Czech kids practice for years, so forgive me. But the piece is absolutely gorgeous. So then we would close the concert with a set of pieces based on poems. And the first one would be Emily Dickinson's Forever is Composed of Nows. Not based on, but inspired by the poem. So her poem, this is one of my favorites, 690. Forever is composed of nows. 'Tis not a different time except for infiniteness and latitude of home. From this, experienced here, remove the dates to these. Let months dissolve in further months, and years exhale in years. Without debate or pause or celebrated days, no different from our years would be Anno Dominis, from Anno Dominis. So the opening harmony, I tried to kind of find something that would be very timeless. And then the division of the beat with 7 notes per beat is also timeless. And then the So the next poem, it is kind of a cheesy poem, but to me it's very powerful because it brings me to a place in my relationship with Christ that I might not normally be taken to. So first, literally to the crucifixion, so you're there, and also the guilt that, we don't adore him and worship him and follow him as we should, as loyally as a little black dog would. So this poem is The Little Black Dog by Elizabeth Gardner Reynolds, and it goes like this. I wonder if Christ had a little black dog, all curly and woolly like mine, with 2 silk ears and a nose round and wet, and 2 eyes brown and tender that shine. I'm sure if he had, that little black dog knew right from the first he was God, that he needed no proofs that Christ was divine, but just worshipped the ground he trod. I'm afraid that he hadn't, because I have read how he prayed in the garden alone, when all of his friends and disciples had fled, even Peter, that one called a stone. And oh, I am sure that little black dog, with a true heart so tender and warm, would never have left him to suffer alone, but creeping right under his arm, would have licked those dear fingers in agony clasped, and counting all favors but loss. When they led him away, would have trotted behind,
and followed him quite to the cross. So this one kind of follows along the poem as well, just like the last one. So in the beginning, it's this kind of little mixed meter depiction of the dog trotting along, and then in comes a more worshipful part where he's adoring Christ and they're praying maybe. And then it gets a little darker and the harmonies change. Pizzicatas enter, and we literally kind of enter into the scene of the crucifixion. Not kind of, this is supposed to be a depiction of that, a musical depiction. So I just hope the violinist is willing to do scratch tones, but just really ugly, horrible sounds there. And at the end, we take a little leave from the poem itself, but it's almost as if, the little black dog's left alone and like, okay, what do we do now? A little bit of a state of bewilderment. So the third poem is pretty hardcore. I gave it a title of The Transforming Face, but it's based on the poem My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun by Emily Dickinson. And some people interpret this poem can be interpreted so many different ways, but some interpret it as, rage and maybe even a possession. But it's dark. And that's the interpretation I kind of go with. So in the beginning, it's just pure outrage and it's the scariest thing you've ever faced. And then all of a sudden, and maybe you know someone like this. Actually, I personally do, and this piece is based on a real life story. But it was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. But the scariest part was actually not when they're screaming and just wild. So even though you fear for your life when they're screaming and going wild, that's actually not the scariest part. The scariest part was when they all of a sudden changed, and their face right in front of you goes to this totally lucid kind of normal, but it's not exactly normal, because they've got this kind of crazy look behind the eye, even though they're all of a sudden suddenly, quote, sane. And it's that the Vesuvian face in the poem is in that moment the part I try to capture here, because it's like they love the fact that they have unleashed this rage, and they just adore it more than anything, which to me kind of seems like a possession almost. And then there's this part where they're almost mocking you with it, laughing, and it actually ends with these 4 kind of haunting chords, as if it's chiming the hour for the witching hour. So hopefully you've never met a person like this, but the poem itself, I'll read it. My life had stood a loaded gun in corners till a day the owner passed identified and carried me away. And now we roam in sovereign woods, and now we hunt the doe. And every time I speak for him, the mountains straight reply. And do I smile such cordial light upon the valley glow? It is as a Vesuvian face had let its pleasure through. And when at night our good day done, I guard my master's head. 'Tis better than an eider's duck's deep pillow to have shared. To foe of his I'm deadly foe, none stir the second time, on whom I lay a yellow eye, or an emphatic thumb. Though I than he may longer live, he longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill, without the power to die. So it's a short piece. It's not something I want to dwell on longer than I have to. And then the next poem, The Sound of Trees by Robert Frost. And it's sort of about, in the beginning, the trees are talking to each other, and there's a dialogue. And then they're all like making all this big noise about all the big things they're going to do in this world, like how you going to keep them down on the farm after you've seen Gay Paris. But of course, in the end, they are stuck. And so they stay where they are, but they say they meant to. So this poem's wonderful. I wonder about the trees. Why do we wish to bear forever the noise of these, more than another noise, so close to our dwelling place? We suffer them by the day, till we lose all measure of pace, and fixity in our joys, and acquire a listening air. They are that talks of going, but never gets away, and that talks no less for knowing, as it grows wiser and older, that now it means to stay. My feet tug at the door, and my head sways to my shoulder, sometimes when I watch trees sway from the window or the door. I shall set forth for somewhere, I shall make the reckless choice, some day when they are in voice, and tossing so as to scare the white clouds over them on. I shall have less to say, but I shall be gone.
So the last poem will actually it'll be commissioned by a modern day poet. And what I was hoping was it'd be ideal if they could have hiked the same Ricketts Glen that I hiked, that the piece was based on. But it has 24 waterfalls and then these treacherous stone steps, that lead you to the next waterfall. And I'm out of shape and a little bit older, so it's pretty tough and challenging for me. Plus, I had a pug and a chow chow mix with me in the hike. But at any rate, they could at least visit some videos and photos of this place and see if they can come up with a poem. Well, where I came up with the music, they can come up with a poem, and we'll meet in the middle. It's pretty groovy, man, and we're even going to have a conga player for this one, so I think it'll be a lot of fun. So thanks for listening to this, and I hope maybe I brought you on some fun travels and you heard some cool sounds you like. And we really would appreciate any contribution you can make so that we can bring this show to life. And like I said, we're going to mention all the names of the donors in the program and maybe even write a piece that includes the names as well. So if you let us know your contact info, we can also let you know when the performance date is. But we really appreciate this. And thanks for traveling along.